Welcome back to Stranger Than Fiction News, broadcasting live from the dark side of the planet. In yesterday's broadcast, we talked about the disturbing new trend of videos at COVID testing sites where we see long lines of people showing up, something that we'd never seen before. And quickly, the conversation turned into, is there a virus? Is there not a virus? Ladies and gentlemen. And are these crisis actors? Are they paid to show up? Is there some hidden incentive? Is there free food like at the food bank? Are they required to show up because of their jobs? Is this work-related testing? So we've scanned the internet to find out what people are saying about these testing sites, and we'll have the debate. What's going on? I think it's important to not rule anything out at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, and to say that it could be something else in the environment that's making people sick. But what's equally important here is to not rule out the possibility that there is a virus. And as much as you would like to hear that there is not a virus, at this stage it would be imprudent to conclude with certainty that there is no virus. And I think people that are trying to sell you absolutes one way or another on this issue is being a little disingenuous, because we cannot say without any doubt that there is no virus. We cannot say that there is with 100% certainty a virus. There could be something else. And it could be something down the middle. There could be a virus, and there could be things that make the virus worse, ladies and gentlemen. And so these are the topics that we're going to be covering in today's broadcast. I hope you have an open mind. But if you don't want to participate, please feel free to go back to NBC or to CBS or to Fox News. Now, earlier in the year, during the Film Your Hospital trend, the testing sites were completely empty. The emergency rooms were empty. There was nothing going on. It was very suspicious, considering what we saw in China. Now, again, this could be an elaborate psychological operation. Nothing is beyond the means of this dark matrix, ladies and gentlemen. The question is, what is going on? So we're going to get into what people are saying. And of course, we remind everyone to prepare for July 4th and this dark winter that's coming. Better to be safe than sorry, ladies and gentlemen. It's better to say that, well, you were prepared, but nothing happened, versus saying, oh, the shit happened and I wasn't prepared. So, it is a tough call, and there's no reason to panic, ladies and gentlemen. Nobody's saying you should panic, but we are saying be prepared, be smart out there, use your brain, and make up your own mind, and do what you feel is right. Nobody is obliging you to do anything. But we feel that the truth is always required. And no matter where the evidence takes us, that's where we want to be, as close to the truth as we can. I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the audience: Paul, Toasted Webs, Popcorn, Daniel, Secret Siren, Kosher Goyim, Teresa Barnes, Treen Turner, Zion, 63 Arphilos, Tony G, Tammy White, Farah, Willis Tree, LRG, Marty McFly, Andrew Cummings, many more. Want to give a big shout out to Bella Marie from our fake book world, and we'll be getting into our fake book world a little bit and seeing what people are saying in the comments over there. Are we the people supposed to pay for the evil of the rich? Hell no. We must remove them and make the future bright for our children and their children. The rich has to lead this country downhill for years and now want to make us pay while they stay in command. Ronald Gonzalez, how you doing? Cesar says, testing is another inaccurate human experimentation that is used to delude innocent people. Human and machine errors cannot be discounted. And of course, these tests are notoriously unreliable. It's like just spinning the wheel of fortune, if you will. Looks like the doubters have a long, sickening process to go through now. Just imagine the cost and how much money is being made off the suffering of the people. It's so sad that the world has become hell on earth. Literally, get ready for your country to get cut off from the rest of the world. No getting across the Canadian border. Many will want to be fleeing the states. So many are already retreating to the desert. So many people and nowhere to go. Have fun, says Billy. It's a flu, vitamin D3, K2, C, good sunlight, rest, no stress, and all will be good. Take care of your immune system. That will protect you. That's what these death towers are aiming to destroy. Vicky Lynn looks like good citizens that don't know their rights. And again, we're talking about the new trend at these testing sites. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? 5G, nobody asked for it. Nobody wants it. Nobody needs to download a movie faster than they can watch it. Nobody wants a self-driving car. Nobody wants cancer and COVID. Stop trying to make it happen, or every poll and mobile store will end up like this one here. 0G, bitches. We also want to talk about some of the new news reports when it comes to what is the video guy doing. We want to talk about the news reports here about the coronavirus forming tentacles in cells. It may help identify new treatments, they say. If this wasn't the most disturbing thing in the newswire yesterday, I'm not sure what was. Startling, never before seen images that show the new coronavirus hijacks proteins in our cells to create monstrous tentacles that branch out and transmit infection to neighboring cells and tissues. And here is supposedly a picture of a cell that has been infected, growing these tentacles. This is what it looks like in a monkey, according to the caption on this USA Today article. Electron microscopy of a African green monkey that has been infected. Growing tentacles known as philopodia, which is something that is also seen in certain cancers as well. A very distinct characteristic of the pathogenesis of this virus. We know it has HIV, we know it has rabies, we know it has mono. That's why people are feeling fatigued. And now it looks like it's been cut with cancer. Did you know that the vaccines are grown in tumor cells and are tumorogenic? Check out our video archives for more on that on the Fakebook page. Let's see, a different approach from early in the pandemic, et cetera, more pictures. So, you know, and the size here of these viruses are way smaller than the pores in the N95 mask, but that's another story. So we've got this one that we wanted to talk about, this article, as well as this article, scientists just beginning to understand the many health problems caused by COVID-19. Now, of course, a skeptic, a scientist will say, you know, supposedly, allegedly, these are the health problems linked to COVID-19. Could they be linked to something else? Could they be miscategorized, misdiagnosed, misassociated? Absolutely. But here's what they're saying. According to Dr. Eric Poole, cardiologist from the Scripps Research Institute, we thought this was only a respiratory virus. Turns out it goes after the pancreas, it goes after the heart, it goes after the liver, the brain, the kidney, and other organs. We didn't appreciate that in the beginning. Supposedly, they said. Now, the question is that many people are asking themselves right now, what's the big deal with this virus, if the kill rate is only 0.02 or 0.9 or 1 or even 5%, what's, are we going to stop the world because of something that kills point something percent of the people out there? And, that's a legitimate question. How many people die from cancer every year? How many people die from, road accidents? How many people die from, plane crashes? Do we stop those industries because 0.001% of the people die? Now, another question you could be asking yourself is, well, what if this was kind of like syphilis or herpes or genital warts and it was airborne? Would you still not care? If this is indeed attacking the brain, the nervous system, the liver, the kidneys, the heart, etc., does that mean it's safe? What are the long-term effects of this virus? What is 10 years of exposure going to do to you? If 10 years or 20 years of cell phone use gives you a higher chance of brain cancer, what does 10 or 20 years of prolonged exposure or sustained exposure to this virus do? So those are legitimate questions to ask as well. It's easy to say, well, it only kills 0.1% of the people. How many people does, herpes kill? How many people does genital warts kill? Does that mean you want to get some, ladies and gentlemen? What do you think about that? Is that a legitimate point? But we're going to be getting into more of the comments and more of what people have to say. If we can find you out there. Looks like the internet is loading. What we'll do, I know what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what people are saying as far as why they're at these testing centers. And I think that's a very important point to make. You can find all of these references on our website, stfnreport.com. For Stranger Than Fiction News, stfnreport.com. We're the best news in the business. Over 1 billion views to our name, and our objective is reporting the truth wherever it takes us. Now, here's something in the threads. Not certified masks do not prevent the spread of COVID-19, but they do stress your system. Lower O2 intake, respiratory stress can trigger other ailments, etc. And decreases oxygen, increases toxin inhalation, shuts down your immune system, increases virus risk, and certainly could exacerbate symptoms of this COVID disease. Now, this, kind of brings in the debate, is it better to wear a mask or to not wear a mask? And I suppose it depends on what mask you're wearing. If your mask smells like glue, you probably don't want to wear that mask. If your mask doesn't let you exhale properly, if there isn't, some kind of exhale port, then obviously you're just going to be breathing in a lot of your depleted air. And most of the masks, especially the surgical masks, with the big holes on the sides, really don't do a whole lot to filter out the ambient air. And so with masks like this, as Dr. Fauci and many of the other professionals are wearing, you wouldn't expect that to be a very healthy or safe setup. But everything they've told you up until now really wasn't about your health or your safety. It was about infecting you and making you sick. Of course, we're going to come back to, is there a virus? Is there not a virus? As far as we can see it. Again, startling images reveal coronavirus forming tentacles in cells. And this is being reported all around the internet. Is this propaganda or is this real? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the question. But even if you're favoring this as propaganda, no reasonable person can absolutely exclude the possibility that this is real. And so you have to take that into consideration. A prudent person would take that into consideration We're not saying that it is. We're not saying that it isn't. But can you afford the risk of being wrong when it comes to this bioweapon that's been circulating for months? That is the question. Here's some time lapse of, horrible. So this reporter says it took her 2 hours and 30 minutes to make it through the testing line, and she'll get results back in 72 hours. They didn't ask her if she had any symptoms or why she showed up. This is being reported by the Texas Tribune. Want a coronavirus test in Texas? You may have to wait for hours, confirming the videos that we've been seeing. And so here we're coming to why people are showing up. Booked in for my COVID test. Mrs. felt crook last night, who's never sick, had her first antibiotics this year after 40. I've woken up today, the writer says, with a runny nose, dripping, weird, and really fatigued on top of the chronic fatigue. Left ear and side of the face sounds differently. Wife got tested along with her coworkers, all tested negative. 2 days later, one lady felt sick and retested and came back positive. What good was the first test? This is from Randy Johnson. No relation. You can't test everyone. Although I wish, the writer says, they'd taken the Twitter away. He's gotten a point on this one. Had 5 guys at work in the last month test positive and would have never even gotten tested except for extenuating circumstances. None of them even felt sick the entire time. Is it just part of the time or none of the time? Robin Clark says he's been sick since Thursday and waiting on his COVID test results. This is June 24th, right around the time that we're seeing the uptick in activity at these testing sites. Robin says he doesn't go to restaurants or the beach. He's just been chilling. Hope everyone is safe and healthy. Don't play with this shit. Robin Clark, probably a libtard. We're seeing, this politicized like most things. Libtards say they're sick and conservatives say they're not. Chrysippus says apparently the people who have recently tested felt sick enough to get a test. The more people we know who have it, the lower the death rate ratio is for Piggy Trump. Hooray, right? So, you can look at it in terms of the death rate, which is or is not important. But what we've seen since the beginning is that there's a huge lag time between infections and negative outcomes. And those outcomes may very well be influenced by temperature, air quality, and other factors. So you wouldn't expect summertime to really be the peak season. And, the flu never goes away. It always comes back, but it's only in the winter that you really see the symptoms of it. And there's numerous reasons for that. Drinks and vitamins before Miss Bliss decided that she couldn't wait for a test. She felt so sick. So now she's ready to go to bed and get some rest and hopefully feel better. She wants to add that she's been wearing a mask and that social distancing and only going out when she has to is the way to be. Jody says that they had a caller who admitted his company mandated a test and found out that there was COVID antibodies and never felt sick, and said for 2 weeks he had been spreading COVID where he worked at a truck stop. Sarah says they did a COVID test negative and she had hernia surgery, came home, and then went back to the hospital because she felt sick. She then tested positive. This is the only way, this is ARM, this is the only way I can think of alerting the community thus far. 2 acquaintances had blood work for COVID and mission Duns, result negative, sent home, dismissed it, felt sick 3 to 5 days later, took the swab test, now positive. Jimmy Harrow says had a crew of 4 guys who worked together every day. 1 guy felt sick, sent him to get a test, and he was positive. Sent the other 3 and 2 more were positive. The one who came back negative wears a buff all day, every day. It makes a difference. Cover your face. I got Taco says that he got an antibody test and apparently did a couple months ago. Felt sick but thought it was just a really bad cold or keto flu or something. No fever. So at the time they wouldn't let Taco come in for an actual test. Nick says he took a COVID test today, June 25th. Was mostly curious if he had it back in February when he felt strangely sick and weak. Negative. Heath Heth says getting the antibody test as soon as they're more accurate because they are 1,000,000% positive. They had it in January. Felt like they were dying. Never been sick and afraid to get it again. And continues to say everybody got it. Lisa Wilkinson felt like an absolute ass, sick as hell, June 26th, summertime. Blood test showed negative for COVID. Antibodies still waiting on the nasal test to come back. Overall, don't care what the tests say. And, you know, what's worse here is that even if you're positive, there's nothing they can give you. Nothing they can do. Not even for the common cold. I mean, they can treat the symptoms a little bit. But, you know, what's the point? And if everybody's been exposed, what's the point? And I suppose we could talk about that. You know, reinfection is going to be a factor. Virus load is going to be a factor. It's essentially like treating HIV. That's what society is looking at, is one massive HIV infection that's airborne and virus clouds everywhere. In fact, the best way to think of this propagation, if it is a virus, would be like secondhand smoke. And when you think about how far away you can smell secondhand smoke, that's how far away you can be and theoretically get infected from a person that's positive. Think about that. It's official, Grant says. Coronavirus has arrived at his work. Spouses of 2 co-workers are confirmed sick, 1 hospitalized. 2 co-workers have been homesick. 1 tells Grant here that he felt very bad for a few days but is still waiting on test results. Presumed contacts are off the job for testing. So what we're seeing here is that, you know, most people are showing up because they feel sick or were in contact of somebody that was sick, whether it be private or business. But we're not seeing a whole lot of businesses mandate absolute testing and, you know, for every employee. And even if they're positive, that doesn't mean that they're not expected to show up to work. So very difficult to say about, you know, the content of people at these lines, except it's highly probable here that these people are feeling symptoms. Now, it might be the coronavirus. It could be something else that's causing their symptoms. You know, the world hasn't stopped turning just because of coronavirus. All sorts of other things are going on, but now everybody is thinking that, you know, it's coronavirus no matter what it is. And that's obviously going to make, you know, diagnosis all the more difficult for medical professionals. Steel Town Girl says, had moderate case, didn't require hospitalization. Doctors spoke often. She authorized the test, but Steel Town Girl felt way too sick to leave the house, could barely walk. Betcha there's many hundreds in the same boat. Charlene says she's pretty sure that she's about to be fired. Honestly, today has just been one thing after another. She's sick. She's being told to take a test, which, by the way, hurts so damn much. Felt like her brain was being dug out through the nose. Part of that one says nephew felt sick, did a blood test, came back negative, insisted and got swabbed in the nose, tested positive. So we're seeing a lot of, you know, whatevers with the test still. And this has been like this since the beginning. We've talked about this over and over again. Continuing on, another person that person knows well has been quarantined. 2 negative saliva swabs, 1 positive nose swab. Right nose test kits infected. Why are hot Texas and Florida spiking? Smell a rat. Is there something going on? We've seen in certain cases and in certain countries temperature not make much of a difference, like Central America. However, you don't hear a lot of cases of Australia, and we could talk about that. They've got, out of 2.5 million tests or 2.3 million tests, they've got about 7,000 confirmed cases, which is about 0.003% or 1 in 300 people, versus in America where we've got, 30, 50 million tests. We're testing positive at a ratio of 0.078% or about 8%. So 8 out of 100 people. So you can see that we've got many, many more people testing positive per test than Australia for some reason, which is really weird. There's a lot of statistical anomalies with this particular virus, but we'll continue on with this girl here. Anyway, she's been sick for the past few days, went to get tested. She's now in quarantine while she receives the results. This shit is not fun. This little test stick hurted. She swears that it touched her brain. Prayers would be appreciated, she says. There you go. What else we got? Sunflower says that she's sick of being sick. Still don't have her official test results. And you can't imagine, the people that have been sick since February or March. It's now June, nearly July. They must be getting a little concerned. They must be saying to themselves, this isn't the flu. Now, most of this is happening in the big city. Most people that watch this broadcast aren't in the big city. But this is what people in the city are saying. And these are all, just random tweets that we picked up through filters on the Twitter. And most of which are within the last 72 hours or so. Hampus says, this too shall pass. It is kind of hard to draw conclusions from infection rates now when we have just started to test the general public, and everyone that has felt sick the last 3 weeks wants to be tested. It should slow down when this group is done, perhaps. Deplorabot says they got it in late November. Got the antibodies to prove it. Wife is a nurse and called him crazy. Then took the antibody test November, had a bad chest flu and a cough that lasted 2 weeks. Where was this guy from? So, Patriots fan, probably New England, New York. Interesting. Let's see. Necron says, had a COVID test Friday, results today, negative, will continue to wear a mask because he got pneumonia for the second time this year. Unfortunately, have to go out for the job. And says, you've had a recent exposure, feel ill, and are waiting on the test result, but your office administrator wants you in to do errands. So you're trying to call in sick, but they want you back at work. Doesn't matter. Edgy says, tested positive for coronavirus, took another test 2 days later, and then had to take 2 more. All 3 were negative, or 3 were negative out of the 4 tests. That is, Pablo says that is not how it should have been done, and agree that you should have the test done again, get a proper sample, etc., etc. His was way more gentle. I don't know why that was even in the list. Let's see. Dr. Rosanna says, brought a motion to Parliament calling on the government to introduce weekly testing of NHS. So they're starting to talk about weekly testing in Britain, but that's not in America yet. We don't have that kind of legislation on the table yet. But they're looking to do weekly testing, and if they were doing weekly testing, that might explain why we saw the crowds that we were seeing. But nobody's doing weekly testing, and hardly any company is doing mandatory testing. And if they did, it was more or less back in April or May, and now we're almost July. So, people are feeling sick. The question is why? Why are they feeling sick? Is it the virus, or is it something else? Or are they crisis actors? Did they somehow, recruit thousands and thousands and thousands of people to stand in line all day? maybe 10, maybe 100. Maybe, there's something else going on. Maybe they're handing out flyers, prove to Trump that that we're responsible and he's not, or something like that. But, for the time being, it looks like most of the admitted, responses related to testing are correlated with symptoms. And you could see that here for yourselves. Kate Moss says yesterday there was an opposition motion to weekly testing, mandatory weekly testing. Okay, so the whole string of testing to get back to work really happened late April. Here comes mandatory COVID testing by employers. May 25th, employees at Smithfield Foods, Ford, and United Health Group have begun reporting to tents and clinics or getting test kits in the mail for coronavirus testing. So it looks like, the big wave of mandatory, work-related testing would have been, in the month of May. And maybe, the beginning of June. May 7th, Harris Rosen's Hotel Empire is mostly closed because of COVID pandemic. One crucial condition for reopening will be testing any of his company's 4,000 employees who show potential signs. And that's probably what most of them are going after, are the symptomatic employees, and not all 4,000 people. So, overall, the analysis kind of looks like most people that are showing up, it might be work related, it might not be work related, but they're showing up because they feel sick. That seems to be what we're seeing in the chatter here. And there really wasn't a whole lot of chatter when it came to mandatory testing related to work. But there was a lot more of people feeling ill and going to get tested because of that. What else do we got here, ladies and gentlemen? Anything else? Migrant farm workers will be allowed to work if they test positive but are asymptomatic. And here's somebody from the internet. Would strongly advise not to go to any Starbucks in Long Beach. Multiple stores got hit with COVID positive workers, and managers told them to work even though they were waiting for test results. So, hard to say. People have been sitting on their asses for the past 3 months collecting unemployment. Meanwhile, Peter here has been working the whole time, got exposed to one person, tested positive, have to miss 7 days of work, and use paid time off. That's been built up because he wasn't exposed at work. Bullshit. Let's see. Olive Garden members test positive for COVID and not telling anybody. Manager was sweating me to come back to work. I'm glad I didn't, she says. Caesars employee dies after positive COVID-19 test, Las Vegas. Going to fight for justice, etc., etc. They're not protecting their employees. Doesn't seem like there's a huge push for testing and control of the work environment. Let's see. This guy says his name is his name. Short personal story. Had a really bad cough Wednesday to the point where he couldn't sleep. Cough went away, but called out of work to get a test. Temp came, took some meds to break it. Got a call this morning saying that the test was indeed positive. So, we are seeing a correlation between people feeling symptomatic, getting a test, and that test being positive. Now, are they playing into the trap? It's hard to say. It's okay to be a skeptic, but you'd have to admit that the scales are tipped a little bit in favor of there being a virus and people really getting sick. But again, they could, be simulating the symptoms by some other means, like EMF radiation. In any case, we know that EMF radiation suppresses the immune system. And so whether the EMF radiation is directly responsible for the symptoms or indirectly responsible for the symptoms, it's certainly a factor that you cannot ignore. And that should be, the standard thinking of everyone out there, except that we've got special interests. And big telecom dollars don't want you, hearing about negative information about their product. And it's just like every industry. But, there's plenty of reason to be concerned. Now, it looks like Nancy Pelosi has just ordered the removal of 4 paintings of former House speakers from the Confederacy. What did they have in common? Besides being racist? All Democrats, bitches. All Democrats. This is a very disturbing video. Not even sure how you would describe that, really. Looks uncomfortable. And, but this is the new Eyes Wide Shut. You can't imagine what politicians, people from California, from these heathen cities are doing late at night. But every once in a while you get a glimpse of it. So here's some nice little street ball action. And everybody's trying to play nice with the 5-0. And look, we need law and order, but, we also need, friendly 5-0. We need, the Andy Griffiths out there and not necessarily the Gestapo. New Jersey politician, 3 others charged with voter fraud in mail-in election. So we could do the news like this all day. Here's a real important article from Zero Hedge. We should have brought this one up. Disturbing parallel to HIV confirmed. Made in a lab confirmed. Tied to Fauci confirmed. It's a pandemic confirmed, and that's why you need to boogaloo July 4th. And if you don't boogaloo on July 4th, you'll be boogalooing when Trump loses the election, because that too is in the cards. Looks very probable at this stage. I want to address the audience, the studio audience out there that's live, and maybe we can go back to a little bit of the fake book. But if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, I want to go through your comments right now and give a big shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Tigraz, no love back. You got love, brother. Jenny Rose says, happened in 1919, 1920, Spanish flu because of the mass. Very interesting. Maybe it was the mass. Maybe it was the virus. The question is, can you really rule out there being a virus? Now, many people, for many people, biology wasn't their thing. But if you research, discovery of first viruses, you'll see that essentially, one of the first things they were looking at was rabies, ironically enough. And they were wondering why, rabies occurred. Was it people having a bad day? Was it something else? And eventually it got to the point where they took some blood from one animal and injected it into another animal, and they figured out that, whatever was causing this wasn't in the air, but it was, in the blood. And so they decided to do more testing, and this is back in the early 1900s, and they'd actually discovered bacteria. And the first premise was that this was going to be some kind of bacteria, that this was going to be some kind of germ. And germ theory was, a big thing in the early 1900s after the discovery of bacteria, but before the discovery of viruses. And as they were trying to isolate which bacteria would be the cause for rabies, they basically filtered out all of them, found that none of the bacteria present in the blood serum was related to rabies. And so they said to themselves, well, we know it's the blood, but it's not the bacteria. So what's left? Well, whatever's left in the liquid. And eventually they were able to isolate a particle that would later be known as a virus. And it was a mystery to them, and it's kind of still a mystery today. But thorough scientific investigation has concluded that viruses are real. And of course, there have been thousands of submissions of gene sequences for this virus and many other viruses. Now, people can debate the science, but I think if you don't have a background in biology, you should probably do more research before building up some kind of false sense of security for people. Because a lot of people right now are saying there's no virus, it's all the death towers. And look, it's certainly a possibility that the symptoms are being simulated by death towers, but it's also possible that the death towers are making the virus worse. And in fact, this is something that we discovered in the white papers. I'm not sure how many people remember us talking about the activation of coronavirus through immunosuppression. We could bring that article back. But in any case, that seems to be more like the case than anything. But I don't think anyone can absolutely discount the possibility that there is a virus, and people that would say that there is no virus for sure are absolutely discounting the possibility that there is a virus. And that wouldn't be prudent at this stage. It is a possibility. And I think if you're going to say that to people, you need to say it's quite possible that there is no virus. However, it is still possible that there is a virus. And until we know more, I don't think people should be running around out there like there is no virus. But you can do whatever the fuck you want to. We're just saying, you know, take it into consideration. Let's see. What else do we got out there? Do we have questions, comments? What is real, says Dura Saxon. What is real? Disinformation everywhere. You know, and this is one of the things, you know, that all scientists and skeptics are confronted with. You know, what is really real? What is really going on here? Where are we really? And look, I think this is part of the discovery process, part of the human experience. What is real? And sometimes you'll go, you know, all the way out into the extreme and say nothing is real. And then maybe you'll say everything is real. Then maybe you'll say some things are and some things aren't. And how do you know? How do you know that this isn't some kind of digital simulation, right? That you're not plugged in somewhere. Well, it feels really real, doesn't it? You know, if you cut yourself, bump your head, that feels real, doesn't it? Everything looks really real. And, you know, people that have been studying this matrix feel that, you know, it's real enough. Instead of ones and zeros, though, we've basically got protons and electrons. So it's a different type of simulation. But the parallels are fairly interesting. You know, all life is governed by a programming language, DNA. Without this program, nothing works. And all forms of life use the same type of programming language, like, you know, HTML or C++ or something like that. So, look, I think there's arguments to say that, you know, we live in a constructed reality. Is it real? Is it less real? Look, if you were a computer debating, you know, what is the internet? And, you know, is there a programmer? You might be asking yourselves the very same questions that we're asking as well. But, look, truth be told, you know, the internet, computers were created just like life was created, just a different programmer. Real enough, ladies and gentlemen. Life is tough enough, it's real enough. So I think, you know, you have to stick with that. My question is, you know, what's going on with the moon? What is going on with the moon? Let's see. Amanda says no one has died of this BS virus unless in a hospital. Maybe, maybe not. How do you know? So it may appear one way or another, but how do you really know? Have you tested all of these people that have died? Have you tested any person that's died? How do you know? So, you know, Farah and Amanda seem to be on the same side. They're absolutely concerned, you know, convinced that nobody's died, there is no virus. Look, you know, I live far enough in the country where there are no crackheads. There are no crackheads around me. I don't see crackheads. I'm not a crackhead. Does that mean crackheads don't exist? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But I bet if you ask somebody in the big city, do crackheads exist? They'll be like, for fuck's sake, they exist. They stole my shit the other day. So now you might ask yourself the question, did the looting that you saw on the internet really happen? So, was there really looting? Are there really black people out there? Have you seen a black person today? Maybe there are no black people. Maybe it's just CGI. Sally Sailor would like to see Ron Johnson go on screen. Well, it's not about me. It's about, the information. But back in the day, we did some man on the street broadcasts. You might be able to find one if you've been a long time listener. No name human daughter of the Most High says she lives in a small town. Crack and meth are big here. Moving out soon. It's everywhere, man. You got to go to Canada or Switzerland if you want to escape it. Let's see. Zion says people are showing up to the hospitals with anxiety. They put them on ventilators and boom, they die. Look, undoubtedly, there's a lot of people that were, misclassified as COVID deaths. But I'll tell you what, we should have loaded up the initial videos from China, the China outbreak. Remember the first month of the outbreak? Drop dead syndrome, people dropping dead everywhere. On the streets, bodies piling up. And we saw the same thing in Ecuador and other countries. And so, maybe they died from something else. But maybe that was a little weird and there was something to be concerned about. So, look, what was kind of even more weird is that we didn't see the same pathology in America as we saw in China. Could there be an explanation for that? Well, they don't exactly have the same air quality and they don't exactly have the same type of population density, which means more virus load. And since the beginning, we've been talking about virus load and air quality as being major cofactors of the severity of this disease. So they have the worst of the worst environmental conditions when it comes to managing COVID. That certainly would be the explanation that I would reason out as a scientist. But, look, everybody's entitled to express themselves however they like. What we would say here is be careful about giving people a false sense of security. It's easy to say there is no virus. It's easy to say there is no disease. Just like it's easy to say there are no crackheads out there, but there might very well be crackheads. There might very well be a virus. And none of us have done any testing. So it's okay to say, maybe they're messing with us. But maybe, they've played it down so that everybody would get infected. It's really hard to say. It looks like initially they certainly played it down, and now they want to blackmail everybody with it. And if you don't get your test, you don't get your vaccine, then you can't participate in society. And look, they're looking to capitalize on this. They're going to drive out, cash and coin and bring in the cashless society. We're already seeing reports from our hometown paper, Fargo, saying that there's a national coin shortage and that exact change is required if you're going to purchase something at the store. And so you can see that they're applying pressure, artificial pressure, to drive out cash, right? Part of the beast system. Oh yes, many more psyops to come. Who else has got... Wilfred says the Floyd video was all staged. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe parts of it was staged. Maybe the guy signed up for some kind of Gladio B event just to find out that he was the next Epstein. So, you can see how they would honey trap people like that. I mean, the FBI does that all the time. They honey trap, the low IQ people out there, and they're like, yeah, come do this, come do that, and they get involved, and all of a sudden they realize it's a trap. It's important not to be... it's important to be a skeptic as well as not to describe things in terms of absolutes when it comes to seeing what's on television. You got to keep an open mind, because otherwise, if you're absolutely sure that one thing is true and it's not true, everything beyond that point becomes false. And so if you take everything into consideration, then you can say, well, there's a probability that it's like this, but there's also a probability that it's like that. And so if it's this, then this is true. And if it's that, then that is true. And I think it's important to make a distinction and to keep everything on the table. Let's see, what else we got? Lior says people's main problem is that they trust. Yes, they trust. They're gullible. and they can't imagine that evil exists. But there's also a lot of people that have chosen evil, and their profession is to tell lies. You'd be surprised how many people are actually committed Luciferians, committed evildoers, and they've chosen the dark side. And so their profession is lies. Their profession is murder. Their profession is to kill, ladies and gentlemen, and to steal and to cheat and to, tempt and the like. So, yeah, there's all sorts of things to be on the lookout for. What else we got in the comments? And as the church lady said, could it be Satan? Of course it's the devil, ladies and gentlemen. Ephesians 6:13, for we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness from heavenly places, fallen angels. More than you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what else we got from the fake book comments, if they're still there. Miles of sheep being led to their doom. Who the heck cares anymore? Enough already. Been there, done that. Let's move on with our lives. No more being scared. And look, I think everybody can understand, understand that you're fed up. You just want to go back to normal and the like. But unfortunately, in the world that we live in, Fukushima's happened. Chernobyl's happened. And this thing happened. Now, the question is, how do you want to go about the rest of your life? And I think that if up until now you haven't experienced chronic fatigue, in the past few months, chronic fatigue, weird, flu-like symptoms and the like, then you're probably okay to proceed as normal. Your community might be real low risk, and whatever you're doing is more or less low risk. However, if you felt like, in the past 3, 4, 5 months, that you've been hit with chronic fatigue that wasn't there before, like mono, if you've been hit with, strange flu-like symptoms, then you may want to rethink, your daily routine and your exposure and your exposures to the general public. And as far as we're concerned, we feel that it's prudent to wear a mask in public places. And not just, any type of mask, but a mask that filters out the air that you're breathing in and lets you free flow the air that you exhale out without being recycled into the mask. And there are very few ways of being able to do that successfully, because most masks want you to cover up the nose and the mouth at the same time. And the trick is really to breathe in through the mouth, through the mask, and to breathe out through the nose without the mask, and make sure that you've got basically a hermetically sealed mask around your mouth. But even that will only provide you a certain amount of protection, and it's not a bulletproof vest. Sandy says, what a effing joke. Look, they're not even 6 feet apart, 666. You notice how they always use the number 6 in their vernacular. They always want you to be 6 feet apart, etc., etc. Sandy says, they're probably paid actors, or better yet, just people. Look, it's possible that they're all paid actors. But you look at the probability of tens of thousands of people in recent days showing up at these clinics and hospitals, the probability of all of them being paid actors or forced to go there because of the work, based on what we've seen, seems rather questionable at this stage. It seems more likely that people are genuinely feeling sick, and that's why they're spending all day to find out if they're positive. The bad news is, even if they are positive, nothing that the hospitals are going to give them, for the most part, is going to make them feel better. But we recommend, if you're feeling the fatigue, take magnesium with B vitamins. That'll bring your energy back. That's what they recommend to people with mono. So you can research that for yourself. Mononucleosis and magnesium, and you'll see that that's been known for quite some time. So use the magnesium to get your energy back. It'll wipe out the chronic fatigue. So, chances are, if you're feeling chronic fatigue, magnesium will change your life. You might not even know that. And as far as other things, if you're feeling, the respiratory distress, You need fresh air, no perfume, no deodorants, no chemicals, air out while you're cooking. Anything you breathe in that's considered a volatile organic compound will cause inflammation. And you can counter that with natural anti-inflammatories like turmeric, baking soda, and other things like chicory and licorice root and many other things. You can check out the video description on our ScrewTube for a full listing. And the like. John Miller says they are scared shitless. That's why they've had their heads filled full of fear by the mainstream media, and they have mistakenly put their faith in the sickness industry instead of the health industry. All of you silly people need to beware of the poisonous vaccine machine. And I think, the real important point here is that prevention is better than anything else. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And anything you can do to basically mitigate symptoms, boost your immune system, make yourself healthier is better than anything else that you're going to get from the pharmacy for the most part. And so once again, we strongly recommend, maintaining your health, treating this as a priority, and not getting a false sense of security with either a mask or perhaps some of the, disinformation, let's say, about there not being a virus. At this stage, I think that's more prudent to say, although you cannot exclude that the symptoms aren't being simulated by something else, some other chemical, or perhaps EMF. EMF is probably the second best factor because of the cost of distribution. The nice thing about viruses is they self-replicate. EMF, the death towers are, running anyways. But if you have to start deploying chemicals or other things, that becomes more costly. So we're probably looking at EMF and a virus. But, people want to say it's all one thing or another. And that's just not the world we live in. It's not always high noon out there. It's only noon once a day. And so, there's everything in between. And that's really the world we live in. We don't live in a world where it's high noon all the time. We live in a world where everything changes and many things interact and counteract. Eric says, with all the concern, why isn't there social distancing in the lines? Good question. Devin says, too much hype, boost your immune system. Many have already had it and lived. Time for herd immunity. Peace. What we're learning is that there is no herd immunity. This is like HIV, so you'll keep getting reinfected. And many have had it and lived, yes, but they may be now suffering from a systemic infection that's attacking the liver, the pancreas, the kidneys, the heart, the brain. And just because it doesn't kill you, that doesn't mean that it's okay. You wouldn't want, if this was like airborne genital herpes, I think everybody would be headed for an emergency bunker. Doesn't matter if it doesn't kill you, right? So just because it doesn't kill you doesn't mean it's okay. But people have simplified the conversation to that, and that might not be okay. Author Farrington says, testing to go back to work, stop trying to scare the people. Damn. So look, interesting point, author. But as we could see from what people were saying about why they showed up, most of it was health related. So, look, some people might be testing to go back to work, but the reason that they're being sent for testing is because either they feel sick or they've been in contact with somebody at work that was sick. Vicky says, $5 says Soros paid these people as actors to scare us all. Could be. How many people were there? So tens of thousands. So that's a big, that's a big campaign. They can afford it, but, is that what happened? Hard to say. Again, it could be an elaborate psyop. It could be. It's a possibility. But it's more probable that these people are genuinely feeling sick, and that's why they went to the testing center. Raquel says, our town got a robocall from police to get tests at the mall, to get a test at the mall. Maybe people are scared because police are suggesting it. So it could be. There could be some kind of campaign. We've seen actually quite a few social media posts from, the city, different cities saying, go test here, show up and test. But, looking at the lines and stuff, nobody would sit in line all day just out of curiosity. What drives people to the emergency room, especially most people these days, is, genuine fear for their safety, you could say. And, I don't think anybody out there in the audience, looking at the line would sit there all day for a test. So, unless you really, really, really had to. Jenny King, I'm not shocked. After all, it's why they were allowed to protest and riot. Could be. Christina says, because everything is opening up, you need a test to go back to work. Of course, there's lines now. So we covered this. We saw these comments and we're like, well, these are valid points. Let's see if they're true. Let's test these theories out. And what we saw was that, the beginning of May to the end of May was the big campaign of, get tested to go back to work. So these people at the end of June, a month later, are probably not the big surge of testing to reopen the country. Most of that would have happened in the month of May. So it was a nice try. Tom Williamson, they've been wearing masks, rioting and looting, chanting they can't breathe. And now they can't breathe. And this is the idea of self-cursing. They're all running around saying they can't breathe, and now they can't breathe. Duh. So there you go. Heidi says, do you think we should get tested, or is it a scam for you to be traced? Curious on thoughts. Absolutely. Once you're on that red list, once you test positive, you are scheduled for extraction at a later date. And we'll learn more about that. We'll talk more about that. We're seeing what the more New World Order-ish countries are doing, like Australia, like the UK. And right now, people that are testing positive have to go into mandatory motel quarantine. And they're going to be going door to door with goon squads doing the mandated testing. So people in Australia are really upset. We're preparing a show on that. And they're even starting to pull ATM machines, according to reports out there. So they're on the fast track for cashless society and mandated vaccines and the like. And that's what they get for giving up their guns so readily, so easily. And they're ripe for the pickings. And so we can expect Canada, UK, and Australia to really get the worst of the worst. And it's really kind of, disturbing considering how few cases there are in Australia. 7,000 cases confirmed out of 2.5 million tested. And they've only got 4 or 5 million people there. It's not a whole lot of people in Australia. And they're all on the coast. They're all jam-packed together for the most part. At least half of them are. So, it's rather interesting to see the statistics over there and the measures that are being deployed, because they seem really disproportional, to say the least. Josh Goebel says, as they get tested, they are likely going to be given a contaminated test and, a Q-tip soaked in viruses. Absolutely. As hard as that might be to believe, the first tests sent out by the CDC to hospitals were contaminated with COVID. The entire CDC was contaminated. All the tests had COVID on it, and so they were swabbing people and infecting them, making sure that everybody would get the virus and spread it. So we're seeing everything that really supports them using a virus as a vector to contaminate people versus anything else. And it's just something else to add to the list. The fluoride, the vaccines, the pesticides, the death towers, and now the virus. I mean, they're just basically, penetrating you every which way they can, literally. And the people in line, why are they getting tested? Well, it seems like they're feeling it. Lori says, fear-mongering, if that's even a word. You should be ashamed of yourselves for even putting this crap online. So, you got people that are absolutely convinced that there is no virus, that there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And I think, look, people are going to perceive things differently. And if you want to go out there, unprotected, and that's worked for you thus far, hey, keep going. You're probably in a low risk area. But a lot of people out there have been affected. And if you're feeling like you have been affected, then you probably live in a high risk area that's going to continue to be high risk. And so you should act accordingly. And that's really our message today is let's be careful about, what we're saying and what we're communicating to people, because nobody can say absolutely at this stage that there is no virus. None of you have done the testing. And so, it's likely that there is a virus, but maybe there is no virus. But nobody has done any of the scientific tests conclusively themselves to say unequivocally that there is no virus. And people that would push a false sense of security at this stage should be ashamed of themselves, quite honestly. And I think we'll have to ban Lori, looks like maniac over there, or maybe worse. Anyways, we'll leave it there. Big shout out to everybody in the live audience. Seems like there's a few of you out there. We've been going on for an hour now. We'll be back tomorrow. I think that'll be it for today. And we got some more real disturbing reports coming down the pipeline. In the meantime, check out our website, stfnreport.com, for the latest updates on the news, and just imagine what we would say about what's coming through the stream. So there you go. And look, there's going to be a whole lot of dissenting opinions on this, but I think those that would say that there is no virus have to admit to themselves that they haven't done a single test on a single person and have absolutely no way to back up what they're saying. But we understand why people would say that there is no virus, given how wonky the testing has been, and many people who think that they've never been exposed have tested positive, and people that are sure they've been exposed have tested negative. So look, anything's on the table. But people that would say that there is no virus need to admit that they've done no testing whatsoever. And it sounds like it makes sense to them, and we can understand why that is. But I think it's important to qualify your statement with, well, it looks like there might not be a virus and it might be the death towers. But to say absolutely there is no virus and to give people a false sense of security out there at this stage, I think is dangerous. So I think, we just got to continue on gathering information and being open-minded about what's going on out there. But from our point of view, based on what we've seen since the China outbreak and all of the evidence, we think that there's a slightly higher probability that there is a virus versus not being a virus. And with that said, the situation out there is still high risk. And from our analysis, it looks like most places have been contaminated. And whether you're symptomatic or asymptomatic is a different story. But chances are most people are contaminated, and that brings us back to virus load. So, there's a direct relationship between virus load and symptoms. The more virus you have, the more symptomatic you are. The less virus you have, the less symptomatic you are. And it's really on that scale. So, look, if you're really here, I got a challenge for all of you people out there that are scientific yet are convinced that there is no virus. Go to the city. Pick a city of 100,000 people or more. Go there, hang out at the mall, go to a Walmart or two, hang around for a couple hours in big public places with no mask, no goggles, and then you come back and tell us how you feel 2 or 3 days later. You know what I mean? So do the test if you're absolutely convinced, and let us know. Till the next time, ladies and gentlemen. If you're listening to this, you are